Ever wondered how Amish cheese lasts for years without rennet, refrigeration, or preservatives? Modern cheese requires all three to survive months, yet traditional Amish cheese ages 5 years or more through a forgotten technique. This isn't modern substitution, it's the original acid set method that predated commercial cheese production and created naturally self preserving food. The acid coagulation. The foundation of rennet-free Amish cheese lies in acid coagulation, a chemical process where natural acids cause milk proteins to clump together and separate from liquid whey, creating solid curds without any animal-derived enzymes that modern cheese production depends upon. When acid is added to warm milk, it lowers the pH and causes casein proteins, the primary protein in milk, to lose their electrical charge and bond together into solid masses. This coagulation happens through simple chemistry rather than the enzymatic action that rennet provides, creating a fundamentally different type of cheese with unique preservation properties. The acid sources are simple and natural. White vinegar, lemon juice, or cultured buttermilk all contain sufficient acidity to trigger coagulation when added to milk heated to the proper temperature, typically 180 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Each acid source creates slightly different flavor profiles and textures in the final cheese, but all accomplish the essential coagulation that separates curds from whey. This acid set method predates commercial rennet use by centuries. Before the cheese industry standardized around animal rennet extracted from calf stomachs, traditional cheesemakers used whatever acids were locally available: soured milk, vinegar from preserved fruits, or lemon juice when available, to create cheeses that fed families through winter months. The fresh milk, the quality of finished cheese, depends absolutely on the quality of starting milk, a truth Amish cheesemakers honor by using raw milk from their own cows within hours of milking before any degradation or bacterial contamination can compromise the cheese-making process. Raw milk contains natural enzymes, beneficial bacteria, and complete fat structures that pasteurization destroys or damages. These components contribute to proper coagulation, flavor development during aging, and the natural preservation that allows multi-year storage without refrigeration. Pasteurized milk from grocery stores, heated to kill all bacteria, including beneficial ones, simply cannot produce the same quality of long-lasting cheese. Milk composition varies seasonally as cow diets change. Spring and summer milk from pasture-grazing cows contains higher butterfat content and different fatty acid profiles than winter milk from hay-fed cows. These variations affect cheese texture, flavor, and aging characteristics. Amish cheesemakers adjust techniques seasonally to account for milk differences rather than trying to standardize milk composition year-round. Temperature at the start of cheesemaking matters significantly. Milk used at 70 to 80 degrees, still warm from the cow, or gently heated, coagulates more reliably and completely than cold milk. This temperature range also encourages beneficial bacteria activity while discouraging harmful bacteria that thrive at different temperatures. The foundation of great cheese is great milk. No technique can compensate for poor quality starting material. The culture. While acid alone can coagulate milk, Amish cheesemakers add cultured buttermilk or saved whey containing beneficial lactic acid bacteria that transform simple acid-set curds into complex, long-lasting cheese capable of aging for years without spoiling. These beneficial bacteria, primarily lactobacillus species, consume lactose sugars in milk and produce lactic acid as a byproduct. This acid production serves multiple purposes. It continues the coagulation process begun by added vinegar or lemon juice. It creates an acidic environment hostile to spoilage bacteria that cannot survive low pH. and it develops complex flavors during the aging process that distinguish artisan cheese from simple acid-curdled cheese. The culture addition happens before heat and acid. Buttermilk or whey from a previous cheese batch is stirred into the milk at room temperature, then the mixture sits for 30 minutes to several hours, allowing bacteria to colonize the milk. This pre-culturing period gives beneficial bacteria a population advantage. They establish dominance before any competing bacteria can multiply, creating the biological foundation for safe, long-term aging. Traditional Amish cheesemakers preserve culture across generations by saving whey from successful batches to inoculate new batches. This culture maintenance creates unique bacterial strains specific to individual families or communities, the microbiological equivalent of sourdough starter that carries decades or centuries of accumulated adaptation and selection. The living culture transforms acid-set cheese from a simple preserved food into a complex, evolving product that develops character during years of aging rather than merely surviving storage. The heating. Proper coagulation requires precise temperature control, a challenge when working with wood-fired stoves that cannot be adjusted with thermostatic precision. But Amish cheesemakers achieve consistent results through experience-based observation rather than relying on thermometers. The milk and culture mixture is heated gradually in large pots on wood-cook stoves, with constant stirring preventing scorching on the bottom where metal contacts flame. The heating happens slowly over 45 minutes to an hour, raising temperature perhaps 2 to 3 degrees per minute rather than the rapid heating that commercial operations use to maximize throughput. This patient heating serves multiple purposes beyond achieving target temperature. The slow temperature rise allows beneficial bacteria to remain active longer, producing additional lactic acid that improves coagulation. It prevents the protein damage that rapid heating causes, which can create tough, rubbery curds rather than tender ones. And it gives the cheesemaker time to observe the milk's behavior and adjust technique if needed. Temperature monitoring happens through sensory observation rather than thermometer readings. Experienced cheesemakers recognize the visual changes in milk as it approaches coagulation temperature. The surface begins to shimmer slightly, steam rises more vigorously, and the milk takes on a slightly different appearance. Some test temperature by dipping a clean finger briefly into the milk. It should feel quite hot, but not painfully so, indicating the 180 to 190 degree range needed for acid addition. When ready, acid is added slowly while stirring typically white vinegar at a ratio of about 1/4 cup per gallon of milk. The curds form within seconds to minutes, clumping together and separating from greenish-yellow whey in dramatic transformation. The curd. Once coagulation occurs, proper curd handling determines the texture and moisture content of finished cheese. Rough treatment damages delicate curds and releases fat that should remain incorporated, while proper gentle technique preserves the structure that creates quality cheese. After acid addition triggers coagulation, the pot sits undisturbed for 10 to 15 minutes, allowing curds to firm properly. Cutting curds too soon, while they're still quite delicate, causes them to shatter into tiny pieces that are difficult to work with and lose excessive fat into the whey. Waiting for proper firmness creates curds that cut cleanly and hold their shape during subsequent processing. Curd cutting happens with long knives in a crosshatch pattern, creating uniform cubes roughly 1/2 inch to 1 inch on each side. The size matters. Significantly smaller curds release more whey and create drier, firmer cheese suitable for long aging, while larger curds retain more moisture and create softer, shorter-lived cheese. Amish cheesemakers adjust cut size based on intended cheese type and aging duration. The cutting technique is gentle and deliberate. The knife blade moves slowly through the curd mass in straight lines, then again at right angles, then at angles to create three-dimensional cubes. Rapid or rough cutting tears curds rather than cleanly slicing them, causing fat loss and texture problems in finished cheese. After cutting, the curds rest again for 5 to 10 minutes, allowing the cut surfaces to heal slightly and firm further. Then, gentle stirring begins, moving the curds slowly to prevent them from matting together while encouraging additional whey expulsion. This stirring continues for 20 to 30 minutes as curds shrink and firm, becoming distinct individual pieces rather than a cohesive mass. Traditional tools for this work are simple long knives, wooden paddles for stirring, and steady hands that have performed these motions thousands of times. The drainage. Moisture removal determines whether cheese will age successfully for years or spoil within weeks. Too much retained moisture creates an environment where spoilage bacteria thrive, while proper drainage creates the low moisture environment that preservation requires. The curds and whey are poured into cheesecloth or loosely woven muslin fabric suspended over a collection vessel. Gravity does the initial work, with whey draining rapidly through the fabric, while curds are retained. This first drainage removes the bulk of liquid whey within 15 to 20 minutes, leaving curds that still contain substantial moisture within their structure. The fabric containing curds is then gathered and tied, creating a bag that's hung to drain for several hours at room temperature. The hanging allows gravity to pull additional moisture downward and out, while the fabric weave permits whey to escape but retains all curds regardless of size. Some cheesemakers gently press on the hanging bag periodically, encouraging additional drainage without breaking the curds. Temperature during drainage matters. Curds that are still warm drain more readily than cold curds because the proteins remain more flexible and the whey remains more fluid. Amish cheesemakers often keep curds at 80 to 100 degrees during drainage by hanging them near the wood stove or in the warm kitchen, allowing optimal moisture removal. The collected whey is never wasted. It feeds pigs and chickens, provides liquid for baking bread, or gets used in the next cheese batch as culture source. In traditional Amish kitchens, nothing is discarded that can serve another purpose. Waste represents poor stewardship of God's provision. Proper drainage duration varies by cheese type, but typically runs 4 to 8 hours for firm cheeses intended for long aging. The preservation. Salt serves dual purposes in cheese making. It enhances flavor while acting as powerful preservative that inhibits spoilage, bacteria, and mold growth, making it essential for cheese that will age years without refrigeration. After drainage, curds are broken into small pieces and salt is mixed throughout at ratios of approximately 1 to 2 tablespoons per pound of curd. The salt must distribute evenly. Pockets without sufficient salt become spoilage sites, while oversalted areas become unpalatably salty. Thorough mixing by hand ensures uniform distribution throughout the curd mass. The salt penetration happens over time rather than instantly. As the salted curds sit for several hours, salt dissolves in the residual moisture and diffuses throughout, drawing additional moisture out through osmosis while penetrating deep into curd structure. This salt migration creates the chemical environment that prevents bacterial growth. Most spoilage bacteria cannot survive in high salt conditions. Some Amish cheesemakers use brine soaking instead of dry salting. The formed cheese is immersed in saturated salt solution for 12 to 24 hours, allowing salt to penetrate from the outside inward. This method creates a salt gradient with higher concentration at the surface, exactly where mold and bacteria are most likely to attack during aging. Traditional salt sources were coarse rock salt or sea salt rather than refined table salt. These traditional salts contain trace minerals that contribute subtle flavors absent in pure sodium chloride, adding complexity to the finished cheese.